Let's delve into the email bag. More mail coming into Fred at farmerfred.com. And we bring in Debbie Flower, retired horticultural professor at many universities and colleges. And she owns a peach tree, too. So this is right up her alley. Steve writes in and says, I have never cared for a young peach tree or any other variety, so I don't know what to do now that I got it in the ground and mulched. I was given good info on how to put it in the ground, and I believe I was successful. But now what? The tree came in a typical pot with all its roots and dirt. I'm watching online videos, and it's left me unsure of what to do and when. Well, Steve was very kind to send along a picture of his new peach tree that he just planted. It's a little difficult to say how tall the tree is currently, but it looks like, well, let's just play. What's wrong with this picture, Debbie? What's wrong with Steve's picture of his peach tree? I see several issues there.
Well, the first thing that jumps out at me is that the stake is taller than the peach tree. We only want to stake a tree, even a newly planted one, if it is unable to stand up on its own. If it is unable to stand up on its own, then we want to tie it. It looks like it's hard to tell. It looks like it could be tied at two locations. Not sure if that lower one is really.
I think that's a branch down there.
Okay. Oh, yes. So we don't want we only want to tie it as low as we can to make it stand up straight. He has it tied nearly at the top of the tree.
That's a very good point you're making there, is that when you're staking a tree, you want the tie to be at that point where the tree would actually bend. So what you do, you run your hand up the trunk of the tree, and at that point where you can get the tree to stand up, that's where you would tie the top loop.
Exactly. But he can't tell if it's going to fall over, because if you look right down at the bottom, it is still attached to the nursery stakes. Nursery stakes are used to get that initial upright growth out of the stem, but it prevents the tree stem, fruit tree or otherwise, from moving in the wind and from developing strength. And so he needs to take it off, cut off that, and it's only if it's an inch from the trunk of the peach tree, that would be far. It's very close. I think of it as trees in bondage when they're tied this close to the stake. It's very useful in the nursery. You can pick up the tree and move it and throw it in a truck and take it out of the truck, and the upright part of the tree stays stable. But it is not what we want for the ultimate life of the tree. We want that trunk to strengthen. In order to do that, the trunk has to move in the wind. Just like we have to use our muscles in order for them to strengthen, the trunk has to move in the wind in order to strengthen. So he has to take it off of that nursery stake and take it off of the very tall stake and see what happens. And it is very likely to fall over. Not right at the soil. If it falls over at the soil, you dig it out and take it back to the nursery. That means there's a root problem. But it'll bend, curve somewhere. The trunk will curve, and the top of the trunk, the tree will bend down toward the earth. And that's when you do what you said, which is run your hand up from the bottom, and at some point up the trunk, I should say, and from the bottom of the tree, and at some point the top of the tree will zing back up in the air. That's the point at which you want to attach the trunk of the peach tree to the stake. Preferably you have two stakes, one on either side of the trunk, and you want them a distance from the trunk of the tree, maybe a foot. The reason for that is you don't want the tree, when it is moving in the wind, to rub against those stakes. And you don't want them any taller than you need them to be. So the height of the stake would be just maybe 5 inches above the height of your hand on that trunk. Maybe it's 3 inches, just a few inches above, so that you have room to tie. You're going to tie the trunk to both stakes at about the same location on the tree trunk to each stake. So it's one line across from one stake to the tree and back, and then from the other stake to the tree and back. But it appears when you look at it to be one line across. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. And again, he would want, if the tree needed to be staking, and that goes back to see if the tree can stand up by itself. But if the tree needs staking, you would use two. And to his credit, Steve did use green tape. That's like tree tie tape, it's called.
Yeah.
And what we don't know, because we can't see into the foliage of how he's tied it to the tree, if it's a figure 8 or wrapped really tightly around the tree. It shouldn't be wrapped tightly on the tree. It should be sort of a loose figure 8 configuration.
Right. And that's part of the using two stakes, because if it's loose, then the tree may fall toward the stake. If you have one loosely pulling it toward the stake on the other side, then that corrects that problem.
To Steve's credit, he's done a lot of things right here. We can see that the tree is located in full sun. It looks like he has mulch underneath the tree, but the mulch is not touching the trunk of the tree.
Right.
But I want to go back even further to when he planted the tree. It looks to be a 5 or 6 foot tree. Now, if he bought this fruit tree, what they call bare root, which would be before it leafed out, and they used to sell fruit trees basically plunked into sawdust, and you would go and you'd pull it out of the sawdust and they'd wrap it up in newspaper for you, you'd take it home. Now, even though it's still called bare root, most fruit trees that are sold come in pots. So we don't really know if the tree had leafed out before he bought it or if it was still dormant when he did buy it. But the fact of the matter is, when you get a bare root fruit tree home, one of the first things you need to do is basically cut it off at the knee so you get lower branching. Yeah. This one doesn't look like it was cut off at the knee.
Correct. Some people may shudder to hear that you cut a fruit tree off at the knee, but that is to keep the fruit-bearing branches low to the ground so that you don't have to stand on a ladder to take care of them. It's a really wonderful way to grow fruit.
Exactly. And you're not inhibiting the production of fruit at all. You'd still have plenty of fruit. It's just going to develop some lower scaffolding to make it easier for you to pick fruit. What's great about starting with a new tree is it makes it much easier for keeping that tree at a height that's manageable, so you never have to get on a ladder. And basically, you stick your hand as far in the air as you can, and you don't let the tree get any taller than that.
Right. The height of the tree is where your hand and the pruning shears, when you raise your hand above your head, the highest it goes. That's how tall you want the plant to be.
If he's only planted the tree, could he cut it back in half now, or should he wait until the dormant season? And can you even cut it back 1 year into its growth?
Pruning to fruit trees can happen during the growing season, yes. But right now we're in the maybe thick of summer. It's hot.
It's hot.
It's very sunny. We wear sunscreen and hats and things to protect our skin. If we cut that young tree back now, branches would be exposed to this strong sun that have never seen this strong sun before. And they will sunburn, and you could lose the tree from that. So I would recommend waiting until it goes dormant.
Now, that is a hard thing to do. If you've ever, and you've probably done demonstrations of cutting back bare root fruit trees in front of a crowd, and it always gets gasps of horror whenever you take your pruners and cut a 6-foot stick back to a 2.5 or 3-foot stick. And in Steve's case, he's going to be cutting off a lot of growth that had leaves, and he's going to feel really bad doing it, but he should.
He should. And what those leaves are doing for that tree right now is feeding the roots. It has no flowers or fruit on it that I can see. And so the food that's made in those leaves, and that's where plants make their food, goes to a couple of places. One is the tips of those branches for new growth, and the other is the roots. And a newly planted plant needs food to make roots. All plants need food to make roots, but it's especially important when the plant is new to the garden because it only has the roots that were in whatever container you bought it in. And that's a very small amount, and it's also a very narrow-sized root system and can make the plant unstable if the roots just stay in that little tiny area. So he wants the leaves to grow, the leaves to make food, send them to the root system to take off, and then during dormancy this year, now I should
go ahead.
Okay, here's the geek in me.
All right, go ahead. We can geek it out.
As plants go dormant, deciduous plants, and a peach tree is deciduous. Deciduous meaning they lose all of their leaves at one time in the year, and that will be in the fall. The plant will reabsorb all the good stuff it can out of those leaves and store it in the trunks and the root. And so he's not losing, he'll lose some stored food, but a lot of that stored food will be absorbed back into the plant and go down into the roots before he takes that stem off. So it's important to wait until all the leaves have fallen off so that all that good food the plant has made has had a chance to get down into the roots and strengthen the plant down there.
So full dormancy would be when all the leaves have fallen from the tree, but before the soil temperature is warmed to the point where it starts breaking out new buds. Here in the Central Valley of California, that could be in February. Other parts of the country might be a little later.
Right. And he doesn't want to do it before then because it will stimulate growth in strange places.
And which might...
as well as cause sunburn.
And maybe frost damage, too, to the new growth.
Yes. So full dormancy, all the leaves are gone, but before it warms up enough for the buds to break and new growth to begin.
Now, remember, too, we're talking about a tree that is only 1 year old or less. For people who have put in fruit trees that might be 3 years, 5 years old, you don't want to, and you didn't cut it back by half, it's not a good idea to be cutting a tree that is that old down to the knees. So what you'd want to do is start a process where you're cutting it back from the top to get it to a height where you can manage it.
Yes. And you never take more than 1/3 of the canopy, 1/3 to 1/2 of the canopy out of the tree in any 1 year. You're going to take a big branch out and then wait another year and take another big branch out until you've brought it down to the level you want it to be.
Well, this is a good opportunity to explain the difference between thinning and heading. So, Are you talking about making a thinning cut or a heading cut?
Okay, so thinning is removing the branch from its point of origin, the place where it has grown out from bigger branch, taking it all the way back. And there's special, good ways to do that and bad ways to do that. But regardless of whether you do it well or not, it's called thinning. And it results in the natural shape. The plant will regrow into its natural shape. Heading cuts are used on things like hedges. They're random cuts. They're middle of the branch, or when we prune something into a geometric shape, a square or a circle. And those cuts come middle of the branch, and they result in unnatural regrowth of that branch. A lot of buds below where you took the cut open all at once, and you get a very bushy, dense external growth on the plant. It tends to, if you have a hedge, you go out and look at it, pull the outside edge apart, and you'll probably see lots of branches in there, but no more leaves. You tend to get a very dense outer shape to the plant, lots of leaves on the outside, and no sun goes through to the inside. So when we're talking about bringing an old tree back to its shorter shape, and I did this with an apricot in my yard, you want to do thinning cuts. You want to find the origin of that branch and cut it back to where it's attached to another branch, and then remove that. And that will allow other branches that are, in my case, below that branch, and probably in your tree, they'd be below that branch as well, to grow and be strong. And then wait a year and take another one back to its origin.
Well, this is an eye-opener for me, because I always thought that cutting 1/3 of the tree back meant cutting 1/3 of the height back, and you're talking about cutting out 1/3 of the branches.
I choose the branches that are above where I want them to be and cut them back. You can either to their origin, or you can cut them back to a place where there is another branch that is 1/3 to 1/2 or more the diameter of the branch to which it is attached. This is hard to do verbally.
Do you want me to put on some tap dance music for you?
So when we're cutting the peach tree, the young peach tree back to the knee height, we're definitely doing a heading cut.
Right.
But you're talking about the old trees.
Right. Yeah, the older trees. When you talk about taking out 1/3 of the growth every year till you get it to the height that you want, wouldn't that mostly be heading cuts?
I don't do it that way.
Okay. All right.
I go to the top of the plant, find the branch that's the tallest. I do this with even shorter plants, and run my hand down till I find where it's attached, or where it has a branch of its own that is 1/3 to or greater in diameter than the branch I'm removing. And I take it at that point.
All right. So that would be a thinning cut. Yeah.
That is considered a thinning cut, because the branch that is remaining, even though it's attached to the branch I'm removing, is big enough to take over as the leader. It has the hormonal strength to remain the leader.
You're a good tap dancer. All right. All right. So, but that was a scenic bypass. about older trees and how you can bring them back to a height where you don't have to get on a ladder to be picking fruit or netting the tree. Hello, free subscribers to the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter and podcast. We have a lot more fruit tree planting tips for you. But first, you need to become a paid subscriber. Among the topics we talk about after the paywall on this episode include more about those stakes that are tied to the trees at the nursery and why you don't want them. The most effective ways to water a new fruit tree, we'll talk about that. And the depth that you should plant those new fruit trees. Just thinking about those thin nursery stakes tied to those trees, you could keep them, just put them in the same place you put everything else that you tell your spouse, I better keep this just in case I need it someday. After all, those nursery stakes are ideal for marking areas of your yard that are slow to drain after an atmospheric river drops 5 inches of rain there. That way, you'll remember next spring to fix that low spot to support plant life so it isn't always so muddy, which, by the way, is a topic we covered back in the January 20th, 2023 edition of the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter and podcast, which, by the way, you would have access to if you were a paid subscriber. Yes, paid subscribers also get access to the complete library of newsletter editions, which now number close to 300. And the full newsletter and podcast features a human-powered transcription of the podcast, which puts those AI-generated transcriptions to shame. You know those transcriptions, the ones you find on some podcast players that are rather difficult to decipher. Plus, if you're a paid subscriber, it lets me know that I'm actually doing something worthwhile here that you find of value, even if perhaps it's only occasionally. The Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter and podcast comes out twice a week on Mondays and Fridays. Some are for paid subscribers, some are for everybody. So thanks for becoming a paid subscriber. Just click on the subscribe link in the newsletter to keep the good research-based gardening information coming your way. And when you do, you'll get the entire podcast and the complete newsletter, including the transcription. And because it's the holiday season, we have a special offer for you if you're a free subscriber to the newsletter. For the rest of December of 2025, you can get a paid annual subscription to the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter for 40% off, and that brings the yearly total to just $30. Look for that offer in today's newsletter. It's a limited time offer. And thank you for listening and reading the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter and podcast.